Hi, how are you? Pystyykö vetää? Good. Hi, my name is Antti Kurittu, and I'm going to be talking about something way less technical than Ulf did, and I hope you're happy with that. So I work with Nixu Corporation now, and as the Digital Forensics and Incident Response Team Lead. Before that, I was working with the government for 8 years, so I've been working a lot with users and trying to help them. And I have to make a confession, I really like computers. I really do. I've liked them since I was a young kid. I think I got my first computer when I was 6 years old, and it was a C64. I've always been fascinated with them, and I have no idea why. And I want to ask you guys a question. Do you like computers? Yeah, because a lot of people don't. But it's quite obvious that you guys do because you're here. You're all hackers or wannabe hackers, future hackers, past hackers, government people, all sorts of people. But most of our people who use computers don't really like computers that much. And why is that? Why is that a problem? I'll try to explain to you why that might be a problem. Because we, as the people who create basically all the software and hardware and all the devices that we use, we have this kind of this mindset that we like the stuff and we understand it and we speak the language of computers. And that's actually really hard. Really, really hard, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to learn that. So isn't that just great that we make everything because we like it? I'm not sure it's all good, because as technical people and engineers, we have a way of approaching these problems. So we design software or a device, and then we give it to the user. And the user needs the computer to do their job. These days, every job requires the use of computer. Well, not absolutely every job, but most jobs, I'd say. Most white-collar jobs, at least, and a lot of blue-collar jobs, too. So let's say you're a carpenter, and you want to sell something to somebody. You need a website, and you need an email address, and you need all this technical infrastructure, when actually what you want to do is build things out of wood, which actually is a great hobby. But if that's your passion, you should also, for some reason, be passionate about computers to be able to use them very well. So what our solution to this problem has been security training. Like, we've been to security trainings. I think a lot of people here have actually held security trainings for their users on people, or at least tried to explain their mom or sister or dad why security is important and how to use the internet securely. We have these problems. Okay, users make mistakes, and those mistakes turn into security incidents. So what we do is we educate the users some more. Okay, they make more creative mistakes, because our education is, well, to be honest, it's failing pretty badly. And why is that? Why is security training failing so bad? I think there's a bunch of reasons to this. And one of the reasons that usually comes up is that the security training itself is not sufficiently complicated. Well, complicated maybe is a bad word, comprehensive, and users don't want to learn it. And I think that is one of the key points, the learning resistance. Because if you're not passionate about computers and care deeply about them, understand how they work, it's really, really hard to teach you how to use them securely. Because most Finns here, at least about my age, have learned to play the recorder at school. Remember that? It's this plastic device. Its main purpose is to drive parents and neighbors mad. And how many of us still play that instrument? Well, I'm not seeing a lot of hands. One hand. Well done, sir. Professionally? Just nod. Yeah, professional recorder player back there. That's beautiful. But not a lot of people. But you've all been there, sitting in the classroom with a bunch of other kids, getting this plastic thing shoved in your mouth and told to make music. Doesn't really work, because you weren't that interested in the recorder. You wanted to play the guitar because you listened to Iron Maiden and you saw the guys on stage and thought that's really cool. Well, okay, now some of you are probably thinking, but I trained my users and now they are better. They actually know how to use the computer more securely. And that is true. It has small benefits, because you can teach muscle memory to people. You can teach them what to click and what to avoid. But the problem with muscle memory is that it doesn't adapt at all. It's just a series of movements that you teach people, and when the security paradigm moves and the things change, well, the muscle memory can't keep up. There's a bunch of, I call these learning gaps, like when you're trying to teach people how to use the computer properly, because computers are extremely complicated. So we have a cognitive gap there. It's trying to teach somebody how to use a computer. It actually takes a lot of intelligence to understand the conceptual, complicated, abstract things that make up an operating system or a file system or how a software works or how the internet works. So if you can't bridge that gap, if the person just, well, to put it bluntly, if they're not smart enough to understand the concepts, how can you teach that person how to use the computer? Well, you go back to muscle memory. Go down and left and click, and then you type Word, and then you press Enter, and there you have word processor, and you can write your letter to grandma. There you go. Another gap is, of course, the interest gap. If you're not interested in computers, they're a nuisance to you, something that you have to use because your job requires it, your boss requires it, and, well, every job does now. It's really hard to bridge that gap, get somebody interested in it. And of course, there's a generational gap. I should have put two gaps here, because I don't think it's only true to say that old people have trouble with computers. So I think young people can have as much trouble with computers as old people. Because we think, okay, digital natives, they're born with a smart device in their hand. And that is the key, actually. They're born with a smart device in their hand. They're not born and are using general purpose computers anymore that much. They have smartphones and they use those. And using a smartphone doesn't really teach you anything about computing. And using apps doesn't really teach you much about computing. You have to use a computer and you have to be interested in the computer to learn how it works. And of course, with older people, your hearing is getting worse, your eyesight is getting worse, your hands aren't working so well anymore. And if you get to bridge all these gaps, then sure, you can train somebody to be good. But if you can't, what should be done? What solution do we have to the problem of getting somebody with, let's say, 2 or 3 of these gaps to use a computer securely? They might be really good at what they do. They might have very good professional competence. They might be CEOs of a company. And we probably can think of examples of CEOs of a company doing something that for us as cybersecurity professionals is amazingly dumb, like sending money to a Nigerian prince. Because, well, they might be smart, but they're not smart in the right way. And as the people who are creating the digital world, I think our baseline is in the wrong place. Our baseline is somewhere over there in the middle, because we're up there being Linux penguins and understanding all this stuff and being really, really up to date with everything and all the threat actors and threat hunting and whatever. We know that stuff. So we think that our regular users are just a couple of notches below us in competence, perhaps. So that's where we put our target. But at least my experience has been that even very intelligent, very smart people are quite less competent with computers than what we think about. So we're down somewhere over there. They can open an internet browser, but good luck having them explain to you what's the difference between the World Wide Web and the internet. Some of them don't know what the difference is between Facebook and the internet, or how to behave in Facebook. And I think there is something that we can do about it. So I was thinking about this subject and trying to see what other people smarter than me have thought about this. And I really didn't find much. So I came up with a word. So I didn't find a proper word, so I came up with my own. I call this logical debt. And this is all the accrued ways of using computers that were founded years and years ago, decades ago, actually. Like, remember this one weird guy? He's a perfect example of the mindset that we have, we call this guy a floppy disk. It's neither. It's a rigid square, but it's a floppy disk for us for some reason. Well, it has a disk inside it, and the previous version was floppy, but this is still a floppy disk. And even today, in Word, in 2020, I still click a picture of a floppy disk to save my files. Which to me, of course, well, that's obvious. It's always been a floppy disk. I've had these. But talk to a 20-year-old. Ask them, have you ever seen a floppy disk? They're just going to think you 3D printed a save icon. And this kind of stuff is really prevalent in our computing environment. Like old things that we have built into the muscle memory of our users and told them that this is the paradigm of using a computer. This is what you have to do. You take that weird square and you click it, and that will save your file. And this is what I call logical debt, and I think this is one of the things that we should start trying to get rid of. I think the relationship between people and computers, for not us, it's not abusive for us, but for a lot of people, it is an abusive relationship, because a lot of attackers take advantage of the fact that a lot of people are intimidated and scared of their computers, and they think they're going to break it. That was, well, previously in DOS days, you made a wrong command, you could actually break the whole thing, but with a Windows 10, it's kind of hard to break it. Well, of course, we try, because we're hackers, we try to break it in different ways, but a lot of people are just worried that they're going to do it by accident. Now, we have a lot of outdated concepts, logical debt, technical debt. I think it's just way too complicated. Like these buttons here, these are actually security controls that have been put into Microsoft Word to stop people shooting themselves in the leg. But are these actually what we should be doing, like putting buttons there? Just enable editing. It actually means run all the macros. And the other thing is, if you want to print the document and you think, I'm not going to get infected by a piece of paper, well, you're probably right about that. But you have to enable editing to be able to print. That makes absolutely no sense at all, even to me. And trying to explain to my mother why these things work like that and what these buttons mean, it's a non-starter. I can't do that. I just don't click it. Just don't click it, but I have to click it sometimes. Okay, well, if you have to, then you click it. They tried to fix that once. Remember this one? The Windows 8?
Metro.
Yeah, Metro. It's a beautiful user interface. I think it's one of the worst things I've ever seen. It's absolutely terrible. And they thought about this issue too, but they were thinking of a different paradigm. They weren't thinking about usability as such. They were thinking about touch screen-based usability. Because the writing was on the wall, tablets are coming, the iPad is coming, we are going to start using our index fingers to interact with the computer instead of the mouse. So that's what they came up with. Everybody hated it, absolutely hated it. And they got rid of it pretty fast. And for good reason, of course. And Windows 10 brought back the start menu with a big round of applause from everybody. And I think the reason for that is that it was in muscle memory. You go down and left to the lower hand corner and you click, and then a menu opens and all your software is there. And just a couple of weeks ago, my dad asked me that can I pin or put these programs somewhere else than the start menu. He's been a CEO of different companies for a long time. I was like, dude, of course you can. And then I showed him how, and he can't still do it. He can't do it. It didn't go to his muscle memory, so I had him do it, and now he knows how to do it. So please, when fixing it, just think about the actual issue, because this is just making it worse. But they did something really cool, because Clippy, remember that guy? Yeah, the older gentleman in the front remembers Clippy. Clippy was an attempt to help the user, because, okay, our user interface is so complicated, people don't know how to use our software, so we'll just put this cartoon paperclip there and you can ask questions from it. And of course it didn't work. This was in the 1990s. We didn't have the computing power. We didn't have the machine learning algorithms or the web backend which it could use, or crowdsource or anything. But I think, well, something like this should be brought back using modern technologies, where you could actually get help using the computer, or just give it tasks. Like, take a small step towards talking to your computer like on Star Trek. Instead of messing around with Excel yourself, you can just tell it, okay, correlate all the names here, and it's going to be done. So bring it back one day. Maybe not that guy, but maybe someone else. Because I think the problem is, in part, that it's getting really complicated. It's really, really complex. Because computers today, general purpose computers, can do so much. You can browse the web, you can play games, you can do whatever with them. And in the world of IT, it's driving really deep specialization, because we have experts on one domain and another domain, and those domains don't talk to each other very well, because you have to be a really deep expert on one subject to know all about it. We don't really have more of these general computing experts anymore. Even Petteri Järvinen used to be one of those people. Like, he knew everything about computers. But who here knows everything about computers now? Like everything, software and hardware. You might know everything about let's say, the TCP/IP stack. And that's a lot of information you have to have. And I think we're clinging to really, really outdated abstraction layers. Like, does it still, in this day and age, make sense to talk about files? Like individual files that we put in folders, in directory structures on our hard drive. And is that really, are we doing that because we've always done it that way? We evolved to that? It's been decades of computing, and we still do that. We just put files in folders, and we're really happy about it. It used to have an analog in the real world, where you had folder cabinets, filing system where you had files. When you start your computer, you end up on the desktop. Well, that made sense when you had stuff on your desktop, and now you have that stuff on your computer. But now the thing that you have on your desktop is your computer. It's a bit outdated there too. And well, just look at the keyboard and the mouse. All ancient things. And is this what the users need and want? Or should we start thinking about other solutions and just start fresh? Maybe. And most of you know what this is about. It's about the number of transistors in integrated circuits, basically the power of computing chips over time. And it's a logarithmic scale. So every step is a 10-fold increase. This is Excel in 1992, running on a Pentium. Looks kind of complicated and hard to use. So okay, we increase computing power exponentially. We get the next version of Excel. Still really complicated to use. The basic idea is still the same. You have the cells here and a bunch of buttons up there, and God knows what they do. You have to go to a training course to find out what they do. Okay, we increase our computing power yet again. Now we get more resolution. Basically the same thing again. Same buttons, a bit more colors, looks a bit prettier. And here we are now. We decided that we don't like colors. So we went back to gray and a bunch of buttons, basically still the same software. Meanwhile, we had a 1,000-fold increase. A 1,000-fold increase in transistor count. But we're still thinking about software the way we're thinking about software in 1992. I'm not sure if I'm alone here, but I just think that's weird. Maybe we should put all this computing power into better use instead of just putting the colors into Excel and then removing them. Absolutely, it has new features now. It does things that it didn't do before. It has 30 million lines of code, I think now, the whole Office suite. That's huge, absolutely huge. So what happens if you want to simplify things? Just make them a lot more simple. Look, I'm not trying to badmouth this dude whose tweet is here. I was just thought that it was such a perfect example of a tech guy's attitude towards simpler things. Because I think we need simpler things. And the customers think they need simpler things. So when Apple came out with the iPad, they didn't have much trouble selling them, because users love them. You just poke at it and it works. I remember when my kids were 2 years old, and they were able to use an iPad. You slap a Linux computer in front of a 2-year-old and you get a traumatized child. And you give them an iPad, they can just, I press here, the picture of the mouse, and I get the mouse game. And then they press the home button and they get to choose another game. Beautiful perfection in there for a child. But for us, as hackers, can't sideload stuff. That's bad. I don't get to configure my window manager. I don't get to do all this and that stuff. And we're the guys who are creating software and helping users, and our mindset is so different from them, because they love iPads and iPhones. So Paul Thorett, a Microsoft guy, really happy about the new Windows Phone. Well, we know what happened there 8 years later. Who has a Windows Phone, by the way? A show of hands, please. Jesus Christ. Okay, well, that's nice. A couple of you still have one.
Just for forensics.
Forensics, yeah. Good reason to have one. Yeah. But what happens is that the tech press treats you like you're a retard, and I don't know. Well, luckily, this being the internet, somebody summoned the anti-sexism ghost, and he got booed, which was good. But the point is not to be an Apple fanboy here. It's just to say that I think they shifted the paradigm there. They didn't start creating a Windows desktop optimized for touchscreens, so that your start menu just takes you in a different planet, and then you see all these squares of colors, and then you're back on the desktop with your app that you start from that. They started from scratch, and they did something else. And once you get it right, there's not much reason to shift it around that much anymore after that. There's an iPhone from 2008. I think it's the first iPhone. And there's the latest iPhone 12 years later. And as you can see, it's been quite the same. They got rid of the home button. Now you have to swipe up. But that's not a very big barrier of entry. Took me like 3 months to master that. And just swipe. And I'm kind of technical, I don't want to brag, but you know. But it's essentially the same thing, and customers love this stuff. When my elderly relatives or even younger relatives ask me what kind of a computer I should buy, just ask them, why would you want to buy a computer? Like, why would you do that? And they're like, well, good question. Well, exactly, buy an iPad. And I do that for absolutely selfish reasons, because once they buy an iPad, they never call me again to ask me about problems with it. They don't have problems with it, it just runs. And if it doesn't run, well, do a factory reset. Everything's in iCloud, all your pictures and everything. You don't have to tell them how to copy a bunch of JPEG files from a folder called DCIM, which obviously means your pictures, right? It's just all in iCloud. As I had an Android phone, because I was a nerd, I wanted to get the coolest smartphone, and I got one, and I was really happy about the fact that I could sideload apps, and I could manage my files, and I could put folders there and do all this cool tinkering stuff, and I changed the launcher and everything. And when I got an iPhone, my first thought was, where are all my files? Well, where are they? How can I browse this device, and how can I get deeper access into it? And I realized I can't. It took me a while to shift my thinking about this, that I stopped thinking about JPEG files and started thinking about my photos. And now my photos live in the iCloud. And the photos on that Android phone, you can find them anywhere. Not sure where they are. We've been looking for them. I have baby pictures there I would have wanted to save, but I did something stupid, put them on a hard drive somewhere, and then just chucked it away, I guess. I don't know. It comes down to this age-old question, basically. For us, as people who love to have the freedom to use our devices any way we want, we have a desk full of people there who will tell you that it's one of the most important things in the world, to have freedom. And I agree, to a point. Because when you take the rest of the population not spending their weekend getting drunk with other hackers and ask them, would you prefer a secure device or a device that you can compile the kernel on? It's quite an obvious answer. And instead of trying to shove our way of thinking down their throats and trying to get them to understand the security the way we understand it, maybe we should give them what they want. A walled garden, stuff syncs to cloud, biometric login, no passwords, no PIN codes. Because I used to be a detective at the Helsinki Police Department, and one of the easiest ways to crack an iPhone is just to check the suspect's date of birth. So that was usually their PIN code. It's like, and these are people who kind of care about their operational security sometimes. But still, when you had a thumbprint, it's a lot harder to crack. Well, you have to hold them like this, but still. Because the question I try to ask here is like, why does somebody who works in HR need a Turing-complete spreadsheet software? Because the most, I'd say 90% of Excel is being used to compile a list of names of people. That is usually, I've actually designed a whole exercise using Excel. That's not what it's supposed to do. Because you can't even type into the cells, it starts doing all this kind of weird magic. You have to start with a tick. It's, yeah. Okay. Somebody's yelling there. Lepo, yeah. But bad user interfaces, it sounds like a trivial thing, but when you take this to the physical world, we have examples of bad user interfaces being fatal. And I'm going to use a few classic ones. One is a country singer called John Denver, who died in 1997. He was an avid pilot. He loved flying planes. And he had built his own plane. And the cockpit configuration was such that there's a fuel shut-off valve. And if you have problems with the engines, you can shut off the fuel. And you'd usually put it somewhere in front of you. But he had decided, or somebody else had decided, I'm not sure who, to put it over his shoulder. Now, I'm not sure if you guys fly planes, but they have rudders. And when you press the rudder, the plane does something like this. And when you have a fuel shut-off valve over your shoulder and you have to quickly press it, do something like this. And then you press down on the rudder, and then you lose control of the plane, and then you die. And that's a person killed by a bad user interface, in my opinion. Another one was this. I always like to play this mind game of what if they changed the way you drive your car as often as they change how you run your computer, like how your operating system works or software works. And they've done this a couple of times, but still the basic configuration is the same because it doesn't need to be changed. You have the gas and the brake and the clutch if you drive a manual car. But Jeep came up with this ingenious shifter that stays in its place. I think they gave it a really cool name like monostatic shifter or something like that. Basically, it has just lights on top of it. And you push it and you hold it, it goes to park. And you press it once, it goes to reverse, and then it always returns to the same position where it is. And then you have to check it with your eyes instead of using your hand, and you can feel where it goes. And Anton Yelchin was an American actor, born Russian actually, who played Chekhov in the new Star Wars movies, if you've seen those. Well, of course you've seen those. He was killed by this, actually killed. They think it was because of this. He got out of his car and went to open a gate, and the car rolled over him and crushed him to death. And they recalled 1.1 million cars because they had hundreds of accidents, just because they made a slight tweak in the user interface of the car. I think this is something. Yeah, we had one case about this where I actually just saw the headlines. I'm not sure what happened, but I think there was a case even in Finland where somebody was endangered because using. I'm not going to say anything because I'm not sure, but this case was confirmed because there was a bunch of nurses who were giving chemotherapy to a young girl, and they needed to hydrate her because it's really rough on the body, especially if you're young. And they forgot to hydrate her because the software they were using to control and monitor the treatment was so confusing that these 3 nurses with over 10 years of combined experience, none of them, in different shifts, didn't pick up on the fact that she hadn't been given any liquids. Because they were using something that looks like this. That's just terrible, in my opinion, just to be using something like this. And especially when your job is being a nurse. You're not a technical person. You care about people, and you want to take care of people, and they force you to use complicated software, which endangers your patients' lives. And one problem that they have with medical software is that sometimes they just change the positions of input boxes, or calculations, or results, or something like that, and people in a hurry, they read the wrong numbers, put in the wrong numbers, and patients pay the price. So this is basically the point that I'm trying to make here with all this pointless non-technical rambling is like, if it's difficult to use, it's difficult to use securely. So maybe we should start asking that how often our security issues are actually usability issues, and why are we demanding basically impossible things from our users, like asking them to learn how to use a computer really, really well to keep themselves secure. When that's, well, we've been doing that for decades. Now, is it working? I don't think it's working. I don't think anybody thinks it's working, but it's still the only thing that we're doing. Because we have this mindset, we have this hacker, techno guy mindset that we're fascinated with these things and we love them and we want to work with them all the time. So here is a bunch of symptoms. What people think about. It's the year of Linux on the desktop. It's been several years. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, sir. You may get up and leave. No, but exactly, we're never going to see the year of Linux on the desktop. Have you used Linux on the desktop? Of course you have. Yeah, would you install that to your elderly mother? No, no way. Well, yeah, some people do. And some people have relatives that know how to use them, and you can configure it, but it will never be the de facto user interface of modern computers for people. It's too complicated. Sometimes it feels like I'm playing an adventure game that's only goal is to humiliate me when I'm using it. And I'm kind of a technical guy, not to brag, but you know. And free and open source software, great idea, great for us, great for them. But getting a community of technical people to design software, well, I tried to learn how to use GIMP, not that easy. But when you have usability experts, I don't think they really work that much on open source projects. They work for companies, and they come up with stuff like iOS. It doesn't look like free and open software. And the Android, while technically superior often than the latest iPhone, doesn't really matter, because the iPhone is still the same, and it still works the same way, and people will still buy iPhones. And of course, there are more Androids sold than iPhones, but that's because an iPhone is expensive, and you can get a €100 Android from anywhere. And well, social media, well, don't want to talk too much about that, but we see when people who really shouldn't be on the internet get on the internet and start using social media. We have 17th century diseases coming back because anti-vaccination is obviously a thing. Have you heard that the Earth is flat? Trump's president? All kinds of stuff, like an email security. We haven't fixed that either. We run our whole economy on email, and we haven't fixed the security. We have PGP. Well, S-MIME. We have secure mail. We have different kinds of solutions to this, but none of them have been actual solutions. They're technical solutions to a technical problem, but they're not a solution to the problem of us not being able to send a secure email by default without messing around with all kinds of weird PGP keys, for example. And the next generation will come and they will go to the workplaces and they will have these same problems. We can't just wait for time to solve this for us and say that my kid is always on his smartphone, he's going to be perfect at work. He's never going to have any problems with email or any of this. It's not going to happen. And don't get me started on Bitcoin. Because I've been hearing about it, it's about to go mainstream any day now. But when ransomware operators attack, they have to affix a list this long to explain to you what is Bitcoin and how to use it. It's just too complicated. And then they hire consultants for that, because it's just too complicated. You can run a multi-million-dollar company, but just getting Bitcoin working it's a lot to ask. It's not going to be a mainstream solution any day. But a lot of people think it's going to be. So I have a few suggestions. Just radically simplify the user experience. If you're working with some kind of a software product, don't think about more features. Just think, what is the minimum amount of information I can show the user and they can still use my app? Just radically, not just a little bit. Remove features. If 20% of the users use 80% of the features and 80% of the users use only 20% of the features, and a lot of the features can be security risks, why ship software that has all those features? Maybe just strip them down. And cloud services, for example. You don't have to maintain a computer. Like an iPad, for my parents, good choice. Because maintaining a computer is hard work, and you have to understand the computer to maintain it. And please get rid of the password. When I was working for the government, we had this campaign, like longer is better. It was talking about passwords, obviously. So we've been doing this for a long time, just trying to get users to use good passwords. Users are still not using good passwords. They will never start to use good passwords. We have to come up with something else. Maybe a shorter password, and then force multi-factor authentication to all your services where you can. And maybe just set your skill expectations lower. Like when teaching the users how to use software securely, just don't teach to your peers, and don't teach just a notch below your peers. Just go down enough and try to see the problem from their eyes, and try to teach them something more. And stop trying to train your way out of this problem completely, and think that the problem is that we just don't have enough security training. Because we've done that for decades. It won't work. It hasn't worked. It won't work in the future. So I think it's time for a shift in the paradigm. Now we're seeing the doc, and this is typical security advice. That they have a problem, but okay, I'm trying to go to this website, I get a certificate warning. And then, okay, brace yourself. I'm going to explain to you what a certificate is, and how it works, and how the chain of trust works there, and what a cipher suit is. And the user doesn't really care at all about this. All they care about is they can't access their mail because they get a certificate warning. And browsers have been doing good work here. Like modern browsers won't let you bypass it without going through hoops and jumping through hoops and going through a very complicated procedure of clicking open menus. And some browsers, I think, at this day, won't even let you do that. But then we teach the users, you just click accept and yes, I know the risk, and then you just go. So maybe start thinking about this thing like a rabbit, and start thinking, this is what my users are thinking. And my browser won't let me go to this website, I'll just take my business elsewhere. Because this is what they're actually thinking. They don't care at all about certificates. They just want to do whatever they're doing. Buy a pair of shoes. Yeah, that's basically my message. Yeah, it's a hotel chain logo, that's right. It's actually an example of what paradigm shift is when your perception of something shifts and you see something else. Does anyone want to ask a question?